In the House of the Dragon adaptation, Lord Lionel Strong said something interesting.
King Jaehaerys ruled over half a century of peace while his children drove him to the edge of madness. His daughters in particular.
One of those daughters was Daella Targaryen, the mother of Queen Aemma Arryn. Daella was one of the reasons why Queen Alysanne contemplated renouncing her marriage to spend the rest of her life with the Silent Sisters. In 64 AC, King Jaehaerys and Queen Alysanne had their fourth daughter and eighth child, Daella Targaryen. Princess Daella was delicate and shy. Easily frightened and quick to cry, she did not speak her first word until she was almost 2, and even thereafter she was tongue-tied more often than not. Her sister Miguel became her guiding star, and she worshipped her mother, the queen. But her sister Alyssa seemed to terrify her, and she blushed and hid her face in the presence of the older boys. Since Vagon was only 1 year older than her, the prince and the princess seemed well matched as babes, and the king and queen assumed that the two of them would eventually marry. Their older siblings Balon and Alyssa had become inseparable, and plans were already being made for them to wed. Why not Vagon and Daella as well? Be sweet to your little sister, King Jaehaerys told the prince when he was 5. One day, she will be your Alysanne. As the children grew, however, it became more apparent that the two of them were not ideally suited. There was no warmth between them, as the queen saw plainly. Vagon tolerated his sister's presence, but never sought it out. Daella seemed frightened of her sour, bookish brother who would sooner read than play. The prince thought the princess stupid, she thought him mean. They are only children, Jaehaerys said when Alysanne brought the problem to his attention. They will warm to one another in time. They never did. If anything, their mutual dislike only deepened. The matter came to a head in 73 AC. Prince Vagon was 10 years old and Princess Daella 9 when one of the queen's companions, new to the Red Keep, teasingly asked the two of them when they would be married. Vagon reacted as if he had been slapped. "I would never marry her," the boy said in front of half the court. "She can barely read. She should find some lord in need of stupid children, for that's the only sort he will ever have of her." Princess Daella, as might be expected, burst into tears and fled the hall, with her mother, the queen, rushing after her. "My little flower," was how the queen described her. Like Alysanne herself, Daella was small. On her toes, she stood 5 feet 2 inches, and there was a childish aspect to her that led everyone who met her to think that she was younger than her age. But unlike Alysanne, she was delicate as well, in ways the queen had never been. Her mother had been fearless. Daella always seemed to be afraid. She had a kitten that she loved until he scratched her, then she would not go near the cat. The dragons terrified her, even Silverwing. The mildest scolding would reduce her to tears. Once, in the halls of the Red Keep, Daella had encountered a prince from the Summer Isles in his feathered cloak, and squealed in terror. His black skin made her take him for a demon. Cruel though her brother Vagon's words had been, there was some truth to them. Daella was not clever, even her septa had to admit. She learned to read, after a fashion, but haltingly and without full comprehension. She could not seem to commit even the simplest prayers to memory. She had a sweet voice, but was afraid to sing. She always got the words wrong. She loved flowers, but was frightened of gardens. A bee had almost stung her once. Jaehaerys, even more than Alysanne, despaired of her. She will not even speak to a boy. How is she to marry? We couldn't trust her to the faith, but she does not know her prayers, and her septa says that she cries when asked to read aloud from the 7-pointed star. The queen always rose to her defense. Daella is sweet and kind and gentle. She has a tender heart. Give me time, and I will find a lord to cherish her. Not every Targaryen needs to wield a sword and ride a dragon. In the years that followed her first flowering, Daella Targaryen drew the eye of many a young lordling, as expected. She was a king's daughter, and maidenhood had only made her prettier. Her mother was at work as well, arranging matters in every way she could to place suitable marriage prospects before the princess. At 13, Daella was sent to Driftmark to meet Corlys Velaryon, the grandson to the Lord of Tides. 10 years her elder, the future sea snake was already a celebrated mariner and captain of ships. Daella became seasick crossing the Blackwater Bay, however, and on her return complained that he likes his boats better than me. She was not wrong in that. At 14, she kept company with Dennis Swan, Simon Staunton, Gerald Templeton, and Ellard Crane, all promising squires of her own age. But Staunton tried to make her drink wine, and Crane kissed her on the lips without her leave, reducing her to tears. By year's end, Daella had decided she hated all of them. At 15, her mother took her across the Riverlands to Raventree, in a wheelhouse as Daella was afraid of horses. Lord Blackwood entertained Queen Alysanne lavishly whilst his son paid court to the princess. Tall, graceful, courtly, and well-spoken, Royce Blackwood was a gifted bowman, a fine swordsman, and a singer who melted Daella's heart with ballads of his own composition. For a short while, it seemed as if a betrothal might be in the offing, and Queen Alysanne and Lord Blackwood even begun to discuss wedding plans. It all fell to pieces when Daella learned that the Blackwoods kept the old gods, and she would be expected to say her vows before a weirwood tree. "They don't believe in the gods," she told her mother, horrified. "I'd go to hell." Her 16th name day was fast approaching, and with it, her womanhood. Queen Alysanne was at her wits' end, and the king had lost his patience. On the first day of the 80th year since Aegon's conquest, he told the queen he wanted Daella wed before the year's end. "If she wants, I can find 100 men and line them up before her naked, and she can pick the one she likes," he said. "I would sooner she wed a lord, but if she prefers a hedge knight or a merchant or Pate the pig boy, I am past the point of caring, so long as she picks someone." 100 naked men would frighten her, Alysanne said, unamused. 100 naked ducks would frighten her, the king replied. "And if she will not wed?" the queen asked. "Miguel says the faith will not want a girl who cannot read her prayers." "There are still the Silent Sisters," said Jaehaerys. "Must it come to that? Find her someone gentle as she is. A kind man who will never raise his voice or his hand to her, who will speak to her sweetly and tell her she is precious and protect her against dragons and horses and bees and kittens and boys of boils and whatever else she fears." "I shall do my best, your grace," Queen Alysanne promised. In the end, it did not require 100 men, naked or clothed. The queen explained the king's command to Daella, gently but firmly, and offered her a choice of 3 suitors, each of whom was eager for her hand. Pete the pig boy was not amongst them, it should be said. The 3 men that Alysanne had selected were great lords or the sons of great lords. Whichever man she married, Daella would have wealth and position. Borman Baratheon was the most imposing of the candidates. At 8 and 20, the Lord of Storm's End was the image of his father, brawny and powerful, with a booming laugh, a great black beard, and a mane of thick black hair. As the son of Lord Rogar by Queen Alyssa, he stood half-brother to Alysanne and Jaehaerys, and Daella knew and loved his sister, Jocelyn, from her years at court, which was thought to be much in his favor. Sir Tywin Lannister was the wealthiest contender, heir to Castle Rock and all its gold. At 20, he was near to Daella's own age and thought to be one of the most handsome men in all the realm. Lithe and slender, with long golden mustachios and hair of the same hue, always clad in silk and satin. The princess would be well protected in Castle Rock. There was no castle more impregnable in all Westeros. Weighed against Lannister gold and Lannister beauty, however, was Sir Tywin's own reputation. He was overly fond of women, it was said, and even more fond of wine. Last of the 3, and least in many eyes, was Rodrik Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie and Protector of the Vale. He had been a lord since age of 10, a point in his favor. For the past 20 years, he had served on the small council as Lord Justiciar and Master of Laws, during which time he had become a familiar figure about court and a loyal friend to both the king and queen. In the Vale, he had been an able lord, strong but just, affable, open-handed, loved by the small folk and his lord's bannermen alike. In addition, he had acquitted himself well in King's Landing. Sensible, knowledgeable, good-humored, and he was regarded as a great asset to the council. Lord Arryn was the oldest of the 3 contenders, however. At 6 and 30, he was 20 years older than the princess and a father besides, with 4 children left him by his late first wife. Short and balding, with a kettlebelly, Arryn was not the man most maidens dream of, Queen Alysanne admitted. "But he is the sort you asked for," she told Jaehaerys. "A kind and gentle man, and he says that he has loved our little girl for years. I know he will protect her." To the astonishment of every woman at court, save mayhaps the queen, Princess Daella chose Lord Rodrik to be her husband. "He seems good and wise, like father," she told Queen Alysanne, "and he has 4 children. I'm to be their new mother." What her grace thought of that outburst is not recorded. Grand Maester Elessar's account on the day says only, "Gods be good." Theirs would not be a long betrothal. As the king had wished, Princess Daella and Lord Rodrik Arryn were wed before year's end. It was a small ceremony in the Sept of Dragonstone, attended only by close friends and the king. Large crowds made the princess desperately uncomfortable. Nor was there a betting. "Oh, I could not bear that. I should die of shame," the princess had told her husband-to-be, and Lord Rodrik had acceded to her wishes. Afterward, Lord Arryn took his princess back to the Eyrie. "My children need to meet their new mother, and I want to show the Vale to Daella. Life is slower there and quieter. She will like that. I swear to you, your grace, she will be safe and happy." And so she was, for a time. The eldest of Lord Rodrik's 4 children from his first wife was a daughter Alyssa, 3 years older than her new stepmother. The two of them clashed from the first. Daella doted on the younger 3 children, however, and they seemed to adore her in turn. Lord Rodrik, true to his word, was a kind and caring husband who never failed to pamper and protect the bride he called "my precious princess." Such letters as Daella sent her mother, letters largely written for her by Lord Rodrik's younger daughter Amanda, spoke glowingly of how happy she was, how beautiful the Vale, how much she loved her lord's sweet sons, and how everyone in the Eyrie was so kind to her. After a year and a half of marriage, Daella sent her mother a letter by Raven. It was very short and written in Daella's own uncertain hand. "I am with child," it said. "Mother, please come. I am frightened." Queen Alysanne was frightened too once she read those words. She mounted Silverwing within days and flew swiftly to the Vale, alighting first in Goldtown before proceeding on to the Gates of the Moon and then skyward to the Eyrie. It was 82 AC, and her grace arrived 3 moons before Daella was due to give birth. Though the princess professed delight that her mother had come and apologized for sending her mother such a silly letter, her fear was palpable. She burst into tears for the slightest reason and sometimes for no reason at all, Lord Rodrik said. His daughter Alyssa was dismissive, telling her grace, "You would think she was the first woman to ever have a baby," but Alysanne was concerned. Daella was so delicate and she was carrying very heavy. "She is such a small girl for such a big belly," she wrote the king. "I would be frightened too if I were her." Queen Alysanne stayed beside the princess for the rest of her confinement, sitting by her bedside, reading her to sleep at night and comforting her fears. "It will be fine," she told her daughter 100 times. "She will be a girl. Wait and see. A daughter. I know it. Everything will be fine." She was half right. Aemma Arryn, the daughter of Lord Rodrik and Princess Daella, came into the world a fortnight early after a long and troubled labor. "It hurts," the princess screamed through half the night. "It hurts so much." But it is said she smiled when her daughter was laid against her breast. Everything was far from fine, however. Childbed fever set in soon after birth. Though Princess Daella desperately wished to nurse her child, she had no milk and a wet nurse was sent for. As her fever rose, the maester decreed that she might not even hold her babe, which set the princess to weeping. She wept until she fell asleep, but in her sleep, she kicked wildly and tossed and turned, her fever rising even higher. By morning, she was gone. She was 18 years of age. Lord Rodrik wept as well and begged the queen's permission to bury his precious princess in the Vale, but Alysanne refused. She was the blood of the dragon. She will be burned, and her ashes interred on Dragonstone beside her sister, Daenerys. Daella's death tore the heart out of the queen, but as we look back, it is plain to see that it was also the first hint of the rift that would open between her and the king. The gods hold all of us in their hands, and life and death are theirs to give and take away, but men in their pride look for others to blame. Alysanne Targaryen, in her grief, blamed herself and Lord Arryn and the Erie's maester for their parts in her daughter's demise. But most of all, she blamed Jaehaerys. If he had not insisted that Daella wed, that she pick someone before year's end, what harm would it have done for her to stay a little girl for another year, or 2, or 10? She was not old enough or strong enough to bear a child, she told his grace back at King's Landing. We ought never have pushed her into marriage. The king's reply was not recorded.